And welcome back, everybody, to the Pixel Vision Podcast. I'm your host, Gamerez, and once again, I'm joined by...
Deft Beck. Good to be back.
Yep. And now, what are we discussing today, Beck?
Today, we're talking about the topic of exclusivity.
Exclusivity as in console games, right?
Yeah, there is PC exclusivity in some sense, but to not make this 4 hours long, we're going to focus primarily on what we think is the most prevalent form of exclusivity, console exclusivity.
Yeah, and it's basically going to start around like the 8-bit era with the NES and Master System and stuff, because before that there weren't really that many third parties, which is what this mainly focuses on. Correct?
Right. So back in the day, a lot of what we think of as exclusives drove what was also called the console war. So you could only get Mario on the Nintendo platforms, you could only get Sonic games on the Sega platforms, and for the most part, those exclusive IPs, often owned by the console manufacturers, drove sales, and therefore are the traditional form of exclusivity.
Right. So in that regards, then, we right off the bat just basically state that any titles themselves that were locked up being developed in-house by that particular console manufacturer, in the case of 16-bit War, Sega, Nintendo, any Miyamoto games, Mario, Zelda, all that stuff. And then on the Sega side, Sonic. What else did Sega have for themselves? What else did Sega technically have for themselves?
Sega had, their exclusive properties like Phantasy Star.
Yeah, my brain just is not remembering it. I'm not as much of a Sega guy, so it's still a thing I'm trying to remember everything of.
You also had games like Altered Beast, a lot of the classic Genesis properties that were brought over from the arcades. Hang On series.
Golden Axe exclusive to
Yes.
Sega at the time? Okay, yeah. And Streets of Rage.
Tengen made a port of Golden Axe technically, but it doesn't count.
Wait, what they make the port for?
I don't remember, but I do remember there was some bootleg of a Sega game they made.
Oh, is there like a bad, unlicensed Tengen NES version of Golden Axe?
Something like that, I don't remember.
We should try to find that.
I might be wrong about that.
That might be funny if that actually exists. We should try to play that.
Mm-hmm.
Let's play a Golden Axe downgrade.
For the most part, what you ended up happening was there weren't a lot of third parties, at least in the very early state of games. Activision was the first true third party. Prior to even the NES and the Genesis, what ended up happening was a lot of games were just made by the console manufacturers themselves. So when Activision came up, everyone got the idea of, okay, let's go and just pay a fee to the manufacturer and just be a game publisher. We'll find teams to go and make games, and then we'll say, we'll put our label on them and we'll go and get them into retail channels. So that expanded over time. By the NES and the Genesis, you had a lot more parties involved, like Capcom. Eventually Sega went third party, but not until much later. Konami. You also had Koei, to a certain extent. They weren't as popular in the West as their strategy games were over in the East.
Now that I think about it, did Square ever develop anything for Sega console?
I don't recall.
Or were they for a while exclusively locked up to Nintendo?
I do remember there was some WonderSwan ports of the early Final Fantasy games, but
yes,
for the most part they exclusively developed for the NES. There were maybe a couple games that were on some consumer PCs, but for the most part they were famously a Nintendo brand up until the release of Final Fantasy VII, pretty infamously.
Right. Interesting. And that's where a lot of... I think some interesting effects come with that. Starting with the third-party developers that specifically do produce games. Most of them produce games for multiple systems, but they're never actually produced games that were both ported or both had versions existing that were nearly identical for, in the case of the 16-bit era, the SNES and the Genesis, for example.
They had their advantages and disadvantages.
Yeah, well, one such franchise we saw like Castlevania, for example, whereas they had a spin-off game, Castlevania Bloodlines, on the Genesis, but technically, even though it was a remake of the first one, the number 4th title, though,
on the Super
Castlevania 4 was on Super Nintendo.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But both are from Konami, both are developed in-house by Konami, and yet they could not... What was actually stopping them from just putting Castlevania 4 on the Genesis, though?
Nothing. It was just more or less a market decision. Maybe they found that they cultivated enough of an audience on the NES that they wanted to keep on Nintendo platforms.
Do you feel like that also would fill in with things like licensed titles, like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, where we had Turtles in Time on Super Nintendo and Hyperstone Heist on Genesis, or even the Power Ranger games, which were developed by Bandai, but basically were like very much beat-em-up games, but they were still drastically different depending on the system they were produced for.
Yes, I believe the Genesis was more of a Western-focused console than the Super Nintendo.
Yeah, definitely. Well, that's probably because the Genesis was also winning the console wars in the West, probably because of the fact of, one, it kind of tried to force the whole teenage attitude thing a bit with more mature gamers, like Mortal Kombat, you get blood, with MK2 and everything. And then, also, it's cheaper. Genesis games were cheaper. I don't know if it was cheaper to manufacture them, or if Sega was just intentionally making them cheaper to compete with Nintendo.
I believe that was their strategy. They wanted to get as many people on board as possible.
Yeah, they also didn't have like that sealed quality thing as much like Nintendo, so I don't think Sega limited anybody to X number of games or anything a year on their system.
Yeah, what Rez is alluding to is there was a policy on the NES that Nintendo wanted to prevent what happened with the game crash with Atari. So what they did was, at least, I'm not sure if this was global, I believe it was, they restricted publishers to publishing 5 games a year on the NES. The way that they got around that was they just made more companies. So Rare, famously, Rareware published games, and then they made Ultra Games, which published more games. So that was their way of getting around that licensing restriction.
Yeah, because Rareware was purchased by Nintendo pretty much to only develop games for them at a certain point.
They purchased a stake in them. They weren't always completely owned by them.
Well, didn't they basically own them by the Super Nintendo, though? When they made Donkey Kong Country, I don't think, under the name Rare anyway, Rare was able to produce anything outside of Nintendo platforms at that point.
I believe it was because just they saturated a lot of the NES market at the time. The situation was, Rare started making games because they got investment by these two brothers named the Stamper Brothers, and so the ownership was half the Stamper Brothers, half Nintendo.
Huh. That's interesting. So, did they produce anything then for other systems under the title of Rare, like during the Donkey Kong Country, Killer Instinct kind of like era?
I'm not quite sure if they. I mean, I know they made like Saberwolf and stuff for the Commodore 64, but that was like.
That's prior.
Yes. But for the most part, they were tied up in console development. I don't think they really dipped their toes in much else that's notable.
I don't think they ever made anything for the Genesis, right?
Right, they were tied up with Nintendo making all those nice games because they were with like one of those sweetheart deals with Nintendo where Nintendo trusted them enough to go and allow them a lot more access to dev information early.
Yeah.
And things like that. Famously with the N64, so how the N64 worked is they worked on opcodes, which allow you to go and tell the graphics unit to go and do X, Y, and Z. And for most developers, especially in the West, they were just told to use the default opcodes that were made to make Super Mario 64. But Rare was given access to a set of opcodes that allowed you to push the N64 to like its limits. I think that the opcode was called Fast 3D. You can read up on this. There were only 3 developers outside of Japan that were allowed to use this.
That's interesting. So would that actually explain why Donkey Kong 64 took advantage of the expansion pack and stuff, like the extra RAM? Well, because they knew about that? They had access to this information?
The expansion pack was only used because Greg Kirkhope was on a Game Grumps episode, and he said that there was a bug that they couldn't patch. They couldn't figure out why the game was freezing. Like, you would start playing, and then half an hour, and the game would freeze for no reason because of a memory leak. So the expansion pack prevented that. So
expansion pack is advertised as sort of RAM expansion, but it's really basically a bug fix.
No, in that particular instance, it was used to fix a bug at the last minute.
It's still a bug fix.
Yeah, but in that particular instance,
it's a physical patch you can buy.
Yeah,
that's kind of funny.
Well, it was included with Donkey Kong 64.
Right. Well, some games
I see what you were getting at, but that was not necessarily the case.
Yeah, well, it would still make sense, and it is still expanding its amount of RAM, basically, which just sounds like to me, basically, they just didn't allocate enough memory correctly to play the game on the N64's hardware.
Yeah, so the other developers I was mentioning, I think it was the company that made Rogue Squadron, they also, Factor 5, they were allowed to use the extended opcodes. So that was a case of certain Western developers getting the ability to make these flagship games for Nintendo.
Why would Nintendo directly only entrust certain developers with this information, what is the actual harm of telling everybody this?
I believe the theory was Hiroshi Yamauchi wanted only good games on his consoles, so he intentionally ordered the hardware to be kind of a little baroque and hard to use. But when you would go and make the games, only the best developers got through, in theory.
Interesting. I wonder if that was the same thought process for the PlayStation 3.
The whole thing with the cell processor.
Yeah, that's an absolute nightmare to develop for. It's very powerful, but most developers had no idea what they were doing with it. Yes. That's why a lot of early games like PS3 suffer from serious frame rate issues and stuff because they couldn't optimize for it. Yeah. It's I don't understand this. I'm used to pretty much Microsoft's Intel architecture essentially. What the hell is going on here? This is not an x86 processor. What am I doing?
Right. So beyond all the techno stuff we're talking about, it amounts to, because of Nintendo's relationship with those developers, they were given these tools in exchange for basically making the game only for them. So they had a special relationship with them in exchange for their rights to put the game only on there.
So that's actually
Although technically, in the case of one Factor 5 game, it was also on PC. So the Nintendo version was the only console version of it at the time.
So then thinking about console exclusivity, then shifting from generation to generation, having to do with hardware constraints and differences. One such example I can think of from a series I'm grossly invested in is Mega Man X. 1, 2, and 3 came out on the Super Nintendo, and then 4, 5, and 6 was on PlayStation. Seemingly, 4, 5, and 6 had cutscenes that could only be, FMV cutscenes that you can only see if you had more of the extra storage capacity, which you can get from a CD on a PlayStation, as well as Sega Saturn in Japan only, and oddly enough, PC, but its existence is rare.
Yeah, but it's important to note that the Super Nintendo obviously doesn't have anything to decode video with.
Right, but I'm talking about the N64, though.
Right.
Because I'm talking about the generation after that. Mm-hmm. And then you would see similar things again with Square Enix, where we said they were locked up in Nintendo from NES to Super Nintendo, essentially, at least in terms of the major game developers. We won't go into the one-offs that were Japan, WonderSwan and stuff. We'll let that be.
Final Fantasy VII was such a betrayal to Nintendo that it took them up until the GameCube for them to even allow them in their offices again.
Yeah, well, there's absolutely no way Final Fantasy VII could even happen on the N64.
Yeah, at least with the expanded scope they settled on.
The cartridge wouldn't be able to hold the amount of cutscenes even in the game. Even if a lot of the maps and stuff are just pre-rendered backgrounds, it's still absolutely huge if it's on 4 discs.
Right.
And then, in a sense, again, with the Mega Man X franchise too, PlayStation seemed to continue to move, and Saturn moved forward more with still sprite-based games. How many sprite-based games actually exist on the N64?
There was Mischief Makers.
Yeah, I still need to play that. I hear that's really cool. But, what else, though? There's barely anything.
There was Tactics Ogre, which was made by the same people who made Final Fantasy Tactics series.
I know there's a couple, but compare that to the PlayStation, the Saturn. Is there even a comparison?
Not really.
No. Is what I'm trying to say, basically. So, traditional 2D side-scrollers were basically left out completely from the N64, possibly due to the way it was developed, because they wanted to take advantage more so of the extra storage rather than the three-dimensional space.
Right.
Which is what the N64 allowed with the 64-bit processor.
But even then, there were a lot of random 2D platformers on the PS1 even when 3D was all the rage. There were a lot of games that came out in 95, 96 that were very clearly just ported from the Super Nintendo onto the PlayStation 1.
Yeah. Yeah, probably a ton of puzzle-based games and stuff and shmups.
And then The Adventures of Little Ralph was another obvious port one.
And that would be probably where the biggest constraints, I would say, with game exclusivity differing on systems themselves would be back in that era, because I think by the time you got to PS2, Xbox, and GameCube, that's when we started seeing multi-plat games kind of get released like crazy that were nearly identical, save for a few graphical differences.
Yeah, what ended up happening then is that middleware was becoming a lot more common. So, for example, there was a tool that was probably the predecessor to the Unreal Engine in a lot of ways. Not as a game engine, but in the sense of something used so ubiquitously, was renderware. Mm-hmm. So renderware was used to facilitate PS2, GameCube, Xbox, PC development. And there was just a set of parameters you could change, and then the graphics would look better or worse, and you could plan for all these different platforms and have everything basically turn out the same. So, for example, when they made the first multi-platform Sonic game, Sonic Heroes, that famously used that licensed renderware. So we were getting to that point in which we could develop for multi-platform a lot more simultaneously, instead of having to go and make a separate version for each one. Certainly there were more cases of that occurring. Like a lot of licensed movie games ended up getting a lot of different versions. Like Harry Potter games were pretty infamous for that.
Yeah.
Even the first one, like the Game Boy Color one, was a sort of a Zelda-like. Then you had was that the RPG one?
I don't know. I just have Horrors of the Sorcerer's Stone on the Game Boy Advance because it was my first Game Boy Advance game, and I hate that game so much.
It's just really hard. But my point is, that game
really
had 3D versions, it had like the Zelda version, and it had many other types of versions. And might I also note that there's a difference between, I have this in the notes, there's a difference between a console exclusive and a port. So an exclusive implies the game is built for and sold on only one platform strictly, but then an exclusive may later become multi-platform. So, for example, in a more modern example, there's the games of That Game Company, which is literally called That Game Company. I'm going to stand right there. They made Journey, they made Flower, they made Flow, and Journey and Flower are coming out on PC soon, because the rights to the games were bought out from Sony Santa Monica to a company called Annapurna Interactive. Because they're definitely an arcade kind of company.
Right, so Santa Monica, the God of War studio, originally owned them.
Yes. So in a lot of cases, companies don't really like to get ports. They like to get the game only to them so it drives sales to them. But unfortunately, not all companies can afford to be so lucrative and attractive developers that they can only want to work with one platform.
Right, and I think that's a good segue into something also interesting that I think spawned from this, because originally you had games were developed specifically for that system, and other games in the franchise might be developed for a different system, for a different company, but the game is different. Again, my Castlevania example.
Yes. Also, I wanted to note that there's such a term as, we mentioned first party and third party. First party meaning Sony, Microsoft, Nintendo. Third party being Activision, Konami, Capcom. Then there's a case of second party, which isn't necessarily an official term, but it's used in the press. So
I used to use it as a kid all the time. Like I said, we referred to like Rare and stuff as second-party developers. I referred to Bungie when they were owned by Microsoft as a second-party, as they were only making stuff for Microsoft. And it was a Halo franchise.
Another example of that is Insomniac. So basically, they take a contract from a console maker to make one game exclusively for that platform. So that's an important aspect of the discussion.
Interesting. What I was leading into, though, and I was discussing the exclusivity of different types of games from the same developer and same franchise being made for different systems, when we got to that point where we were utilizing middleware and game engines in general that were allowing us to make games that could be easily exported in the same sense you would export a file, a different file type, like an MP3 or an AVI file or something, that's, in layman's terms, basically what they were doing. They developed it on their own tools and everything, and that engine was already made to basically take advantage of whatever system was exporting it to, and they would just drop settings down a bit. Like if you were going from PS2 to Xbox to GameCube, you would just decrease the settings a little bit for each one, since the Xbox was the most powerful system of that generation, the PS2 was the weakest. But the differences were still fairly negligible for the most part, though it could easily be tweaked.
Right.
It's not in the same sense where you have a little different graphics processor or sound chip to utilize that are totally, totally different and alien to the other systems. In the case of the Super Nintendo, the Genesis sound totally different. You could not mimic the sounds if you tried.
This because the Super Nintendo was sample-based, and then the Genesis was FM synthesis-based.
Right. So, when we get to this point where everything is so similar, I think what started to happen too was that's when we started getting exclusive content to certain versions of games being released on systems. One such example I think that was definitely no more utilized as a marketing tool was Soul Calibur. So the original Soul Calibur was
Dreamcast.
A weapon-based fighting game. Well, first it was released in the arcade, wasn't it? That was released in Dreamcast?
Well, there was a game before Soul Calibur 1 called Soul Edge that was released on PlayStation 1 and arcades.
Yeah, nobody bought it.
Soul Calibur was an exclusive to the Dreamcast.
Yeah.
Then starting with 2, it was on everything, but the X factor was the fact that each version had an exclusive character.
Right.
Link on the GameCube, Heihachi on the PS2, and Spawn on the Xbox version.
Right, because Xbox got a Spawn game. It's kind of funny thinking about this, that Microsoft's mascot apparently at that time was Spawn.
What, not Blinks?
Blinks? Yeah, what else could be? Why was it a Master Chief, I guess, really, when you think about it?
Master Chief is... Microsoft doesn't really believe in mascots. A lot of Western companies, with some notable exceptions, don't necessarily have mascots.
Yeah, they are kind of a product of their time. I mean, Nintendo will, die with their fists in the air before they ever give up Mario.
Yes.
And Sega kind of a movie coming out tells you they're not giving up Sonic ever. But yeah, most of them really don't rely on it. I mean, Sony's closest thing to a mascot is Kratos, which I'm gonna get to in a moment.
In a sense, they have multiple mascots now.
Yeah, but I really never really see Sony push anybody else but like Kratos and I guess technically Drake. Since Uncharted is a Sony exclusive still.
Yeah. So, to counterpoint what you were saying about the fact that standardized engines and middleware are making it easier to make multi-platform games with the snap of your finger, but what's also happening is dev kits are more expensive, licensing fees are more expensive, the media is more expensive, you have to go and put things on the digital storefronts, and there's a cost to hosting that content. So what ends up happening is these games are more expensive to make inherently, and they take longer to make.
Right.
Unless you're making an indie game. Then there's various degrees of complexity to that.
Right. I do think, though, it's worth mentioning that kind of hardware limitation thing did kind of come right back around after a while when we got to the PlayStation 3, Xbox 360 era, as not only were we starting to take advantage of digital downloads and stuff, and that's where DLC on consoles started becoming a prevalent thing and slowly becoming a more, acceptable concept in the game industry, whereas before it was novelty and restricted to PC for the most part.
Yeah.
Regarding the PlayStation and Xbox 360, one such example is games that originally came out for the Xbox 360, which use DVDs, at the very most a dual-layer DVD, to store the game data. So, you have a DVD standard 4.7 gigabytes size, and then double that if you have a dual-layer DVD. A dual-layer Blu-ray can handle around 50 gigs. So, you had games like Tales of Vesperia, which is a JRPG that was released on Xbox 360, get re-released on the PlayStation 3 a year later with additional content, all voices dubbed over, sections of the game that didn't have voice acting, dual audio tracks for both Japanese and English, as well as extra bonus content that was really just DLC.
Right, but then Namco paid Microsoft to have it be exclusively on the Xbox, and all that exclusive content was unseen in the West for a decade until Vesperia Definitive Edition.
Right, and that's on the PS4.
Yes, it's on everything.
Yeah, and another such example too would also just be kind of trying to boost sales of, I guess you'd say, renew interest in something. BioShock 2, or at least on the PS3, also includes BioShock 1. Something the 360 version can't even do because it couldn't fit it on the disc.
Yeah, it couldn't be physically on the disc itself.
Correct, yeah. So it actually did include that. Before that, basically, you would buy the game and it would come with the older game on a disc if you're lucky. That's a rare thing that really ever happens anymore. It's becoming more and more rare in this digital age anyway.
You also had weird features like, let's go and sell a movie and then it has a bonus game on the disc. The PlayStation 3 had that a lot.
Really?
Yeah, there were some Blu-rays that actually included a game on the disc.
I did not know that.
This is not necessarily a topic of exclusivity in terms of games only appearing on a platform, but, for example, there was a compilation of anime shorts called Short Piece, P-E-A-C-E, and that includes an exclusive Suda 5-1 game called The Something of Renko Tsukigimi.
I did not know that.
I used to own the physical edition of that. I have it on my PlayStation 3.
How many of these Blu-rays do exist?
There aren't many of them, but it was something you could do. For example, there is... I think you can buy a Blu-ray of Konosuba on the PlayStation 3. Or It's on one of the consoles. It includes a game on it that you can play on it.
Now that I think about it, I do remember being able to play games on DVD players a little bit. A few of them had that built into it. It was rare though. They weren't good. They playing junk, basically.
Yeah, I believe with Konosuba, if you go and play it on your PlayStation 4, there's a Mega Man ripoff game you could play off the disc.
I actually kind of seriously want to do that. But going back to PlayStation 3, Xbox 360 era, because the Wii pretty much wanted nothing to do with this, since
couldn't even play DVDs.
It wasn't. It could,
but you just didn't have the license for it.
You had to hack it.
Yes.
You can play DVDs on it because, technically speaking, their discs are basically still DVDs.
Yeah.
Even if they do kind of make it proprietary, they're basically DVDs. They use the same laser. But anyway. Since the Wii wasn't even involved with that, PlayStation, Xbox 360, this is where I think the war of game-exclusive content started happening, as well as timed-exclusive content, which isn't much different than what we were taught before with DLC and season passes and stuff. But this is basically when Sony and Microsoft, I mean, they still are to this day, but I think during this era is when they really became at each other's throats, buying up anything they could in order to get a leg up on the competition, especially in the case of a lot of the AAA games being developed that I think had more of a mainstream audience appeal. So you've got your super mainstream shooters like Call of Duty and Battlefield, Assassin's Creed.
Wasn't Battlefield multi-platform?
No, they were multi-platform, but they had exclusive content.
Oh, right.
So did, what is it, Medal of Honor?
Yes.
Like, a lot of the shooters, basically, especially, I think, if they were multi-platform, they tried to lock it up with, on Xbox, you get these maps before the PlayStation and the PC crowd, which, considering PC gamers are a lot where first-person shooters originated, and it's still where it's most hardcore played, that pissed off a lot of PC gamers, and still does to this day.
Plus, no cross-platform play at the time.
Yeah.
Except with certain instances.
Well, honestly, cross-platform play on PC and console with shooters is still, as I stated in our shooter episode, is just a bad idea. You will lose. Unless you are, a really good console player.
There's some people that, use one hand with a control stick and then they use the mouse with the other hand.
Yeah, you can do that. I mean, there's, adapters you can use a mouse and keyboard on a console, and honestly, it's not fair at all, but...
Then Microsoft sells their $200 Xbox One controller, the Elite.
I don't know who honestly buys those things.
Esports pros.
I feel like they're already so good at the game anyway, they don't even need it.
Well, it's for the wannabes, it's a market.
Yeah, I feel like it's being bought by the people who think they're going to be, really, really good at the game just because they have this $200 controller.
Right. And then you also end up having situations in the modern era where Microsoft has a policy, or at least had a policy for the Xbox One, in which if a game doesn't come out on Xbox One the same day as other platforms, then you need to make something extra for the game when it does come out on the Xbox to make it worth it for people who are waiting.
And you said your best example of this was going to be the upcoming SNK collection, right?
Yeah, so the SNK 40th Anniversary Collection has an exclusive game that's only going to be on the Xbox One version, Baseball Stars. There's no reason why it couldn't be on the other ones, but it's very clear that something of the policy is still there. I know that Microsoft PR did deny that there was such a policy, but it's so obvious in a lot of ways that it's kind of not even funny.
Yeah. It's pretty obvious, especially because I remember a lot of E3s. This is where this stuff started getting seriously announced. You would have a game coming out, especially the multi-plat, shooters and stuff, like I said. You would have them coming out, and they would be announced, but who was going to actually be the ones to announce the actual game? Sounds like it was a money deal behind the scenes, basically, because sometimes you would see, Xbox's, Microsoft's press conference for E3. Oh, that's our first preview of Call of Duty Ghosts, I guess. Or PlayStation, Sony. That's our first preview of the next Battlefield coming out. I'm still going quite a few years back here. Or not too many, about 10-ish or so. But still, at the same time, the games were coming out the exact same day. There was no difference. They were practically identical.
There are such things as marketing exclusivity contracts.
Yeah, and that's what I'm getting at regarding that. And I think...
So, like, they're the first one to present it. They have the exclusive right to advertise that it's on the platform. You can't go and order commercials that say X and Y for your platform.
And I think when mascot characters stopped being a thing too much for most systems, this was what they moved on to. But because before that, you could have, our exclusive character. You can play as Link or whatever in this version of Soul Calibur, since Nintendo really seems to be hanging on to mascots for the most part. And Sony kind of...
Japanese companies do a lot more with that.
Japanese companies do. But there's some Westerns that kind of... I think Sony has, like, the B-grade mascots, if you will. I mean, after all, they tried to make their own Smash Brothers, which, if you really think about it, Smash Brothers is basically mascots beating the hell out of each other. That's basically what Smash Brothers is. It's mascot versus mascot versus mascot. I know they're all from different games, but they're all their titular characters. That's a mascot.
Here's a little quiz for you, Rez. Who is the Japanese PlayStation mascot?
The Japanese PlayStation mascot? Just PlayStation 1?
The PlayStation brand.
Oh. I don't know.
It's Toro-kun, the little cat mascot. He was in PlayStation All-Stars Battle Royale. He has been, since PlayStation 1, the mascot for the Japanese PlayStation brand. He was the star of what was known as this thing called Mainichi Ishin, which was basically, here's the news on the latest PlayStation games. I'm a cute cat. Listen to what I'm saying.
Sounds very Japanese.
So Toro-kun had his own game. He had his own PSP thing that updated regularly with little cute mini games relating to games coming out. He's been all over Japanese PlayStation branding for at least over a decade. And he's completely unknown here. You can set your avatar to him if you find him in the avatar section on the PlayStation 4.
Well, you know, I can one-up you on this with something even more ridiculous. For how important mascot culture is in Japan still, do you know who the mascot is of Pizza Hut?
I know there's like a little pizza coon, right?
You're close. It's Cheese Coon.
Yeah, Cheese Coon, the one that appeared in Code Geass.
Yep.
They had to edit out of dub.
It depends what version you watch, but yeah, I think it adds kind of silly personality to the show, actually, because it never really affects the plot.
Yeah.
Nobody ever says, let's go to Pizza Hut.
Well, I know that, like, they're fighting a war and they're all, like, teenagers who go to high school, so apparently they gotta eat pizza constantly. Wasn't there even a girl who, like, she was seen eating...
C2. She's actually a witch. I am not going to explain the plot of Code Geass, I just wanted to mention that.
But she just eats pizza constantly and people call her Pizza Butt or something?
No! She just eats pizza because she's literally a witch from another time.
She likes pizza?
If you came from... Okay, if you came from essentially the Middle Ages, that's practically where she's from. I don't know the exact timeline. Like, she isn't familiar with modern day world stuff at all. And you discovered pizza. And remember, all you had to eat before was, like, the stuff you had to grow and everything. And you don't know, there could be manure and stuff stuck on this. Like, there's no height sanitation. You're tasting pizza for the first time. You're tasting all that MSG, all those delicious chemicals that our wonderful food providers from the FDA give us. I bet you'd be damn obsessed with it, too.
Yeah.
When foreigners come to America, and I'm not saying America is a place or anything in that regard, you can't help but notice, wow, our food is like almost as if it chemically forces you to enjoy it.
It's like, in some versions of the Wonder Woman comics, she's like completely unfamiliar with like American culture, obviously, because she's an Amazon.
Yeah.
So there's some moments where it's like, wow, this thing called ice cream is great, guys.
That's basically it.
She isn't trying to eat bars of soap like Starfire would.
Oh, Starfire. I want Teen Titans to come back. Anyway.
Teen Titans Go has been here for a long time, bro.
That's not real.
That show...
That's just a bad dream.
I mean, I like the dramatic parts of Teen Titans, but I think that the comedy segments were also good, so having a show all about that is fine. It's within the tone of the show.
I disagree, but we're not here to discuss Teen Titans.
Also,
or anime, for that matter. We'll make a different podcast for that, maybe, or something.
Another thing we haven't touched upon yet is pre-order exclusive content.
How about back to the games? Yeah, that is a good one. Especially, that's right. I know things like Fable, for example, were pushing that. You can pre-order and you get this specific sword, or you get this specific pet.
You pre-order Shin Megami Tensei 4 from Amazon, you get a big outfit with a golden A on it.
You know what?
That was seriously a Shin Megami Tensei 4 item.
What was the item?
It was Amazon exclusive armor for your main character that had like a big A on it.
Oh, Bezos will be so proud.
Yeah. Well, he's got to be proud of something.
I'm sure he's proud of a lot of
He's
things.
proud of his muscle. Have you seen him? He lifts a ton of weights. There's a funny comparison picture of him, like, the dude who started the book company back in the 90s, and then now he's, like, got really fucking swole.
Talking about the creator of Amazon, by the way.
Yeah.
Nobody knew what I was referencing. That's really funny, but that's also really stupid.
There's another case of whenever a new Ubisoft game comes out, usually Assassin's Creed, there are charts that they release saying what you can get from each retailer on each platform, and there's no really such thing as a complete version of any of the Assassin's Creed games for that reason. Like, there's always going to be something stupid that was only on, like, one platform. Like, Assassin's Creed Unity for the PS3 probably has some exclusive content that's only been available then ever.
Well, Assassin's Creed, I believe 3 has the Benedict Arnold's Treachery DLC on it that isn't available on the Xbox version. I don't think it ever was, actually.
Then you had instances of Final Fantasy 15, when you pre-ordered it from different retailers, had all sorts of exclusive weapons you could get, but then they appeared on the PlayStation Network, I noticed, for like $4 a pop.
Yeah, and that's where we get to things that actually were timed exclusives, which is why I didn't mention this yet, but one good example of that was when Microsoft and Sony were at each other's throats with this. It still kind of are, but I think it has lessened a little bit lately. The Arkham Asylum Batman games, where you could only play as the Joker on the PS3 version, was a timed thing, I believe, which was eventually released for the Xbox 360. And PC, I believe, at some point. And then you also had really, really weird exclusive content, if you can even consider it content, with the Wii U. The Wii really didn't touch on multi-plats at all.
At the
beginning,
Wii U
did some...
At the beginning, they did. You had an exclusive version of Mass Effect 3 that had special things you could do on the touchscreen.
Yeah. Well, like I said, the Wii itself, like, they had it basically, it was so underpowered compared to the PS3 and the 360, they just basically had to make a different game for the Wii entirely, for the most part.
Yeah.
Or the Wii got a port of a PS2 game, or a GameCube game.
What a lot of people don't know...
Generation behind.
What a lot of people don't know is that a lot of the tools that were being made for developers around the time of the very late PS2 and the Wii and the PSP is that Sony effectively released a dev kit that allowed you to publish on PS2 and PSP at the same time.
I mean, doesn't surprise me.
So that's why you got Secret Agent Clank, for example, on both the PS2 and the PSP around the same time.
Really? I thought Secret Agent Clank came out on the PSP first. Or at least it was only advertised.
It was
on the PSP.
It was on the PSP, but then it also came out on the PS2. And this is mildly off topic, but that also happened because the PlayStation 2 was really popular in South America and Brazil. So having those games, you couldn't easily get a PSP there for a cheap price at the time. So It was cost effective for them to go and make a PS2 version of these games for that market.
Right.
They were released here anyway because it's pennies to go and publish a DVD game.
What I was thinking, though, in terms of the Wii U, though, was, that Mass Effect example is good, but I was also at the Arkham games. Arkham City had, like, this armored edition that utilized the touchscreen of the Wii U, essentially, which, honestly, was kind of really gimmicky.
And then Rayman Legends famously had that mode where you could control Murphy with the touchscreen while Rayman auto ran around. Yeah. And that was sort of porting over to the Switch version, but it's not necessarily the same thing.
Do you think that was, like... It was just trying to, like, utilize the same gimmick as the Wii did with the motion controls and just fell flat on its face? Because I don't think they sold well at all.
Well, the Wii U, people confused it for an extension of the Wii. They thought it was an accessory.
Yeah, that's all the casual stuff, basically.
Yes.
The actual gamers knew what it was. It was a sequel, and you basically bought your Nintendo titles on it, and that's all it really ever came out for it anyway.
Yes.
And that and the fact that they, and speaking of exclusivity, somehow... After, apparently they could not get funding enough, Nintendo locked up Bayonetta 2 for themselves.
Yes.
Which was at one point a Wii U exclusive.
And that was a surprise to a lot of people. Bayonetta 1 came out in 2010.
It's a great game. The PS3 version does suffer from Platinum Games not understanding how to utilize its architecture well enough, and it has frame rates and screen turn issues, but it's still playable. I have the PS3.
But it's a very uncharacteristic game for Nintendo to lock up as an exclusive.
Well, yeah, it's basically Hideki Kamiya's sequel to Devil May Cry, unofficially speaking.
Yes.
It's just as tongue-in-cheek. It's actually even more so in a lot of ways, actually. It's the same hack-and-slash combat, just a different character and a different story.
A lot of people argue that Bayonetta's combat is slower, though.
It is a little bit slower. It's also arguably easier.
It's also parry-based, right?
Yeah, there is more blocking with it. With Devil May Cry, there is defending, but it's more so akin to the styles, since Devil May Cry 2. There's one style called Royal Guard. That one's all about parrying at the right moment and then dishing the damage back out. Bayonetta had a bit more of a focus on blocking. I still have to play 2, but I did enjoy 1 very much. That was exclusive, and then it got ported to the Switch. But interesting thing, though, is the fact that the Wii U version actually came with Bayonetta on a disc. Bayonetta 1.
For a limited time.
It's in. I have the game sealed. I still have 2, I just never got to play it.
Right, but what was notable, that was the first print.
Yes. But the thing is, now it's just a digital download for Bayonetta 2 if you buy it on the Switch. So
it's a download for 1.
Yeah, it's download for 1. Yeah.
2 is on the card.
Well, that's what I was getting at. Yeah, 2 is on the actual cartridge. Bayonetta 1 is a download, which we already kind of discussed a lot with games as a service and everything, especially in the case of other re-releases coming out like Spyro, Crash, where the first remake is on the cartridge or the disc, but the rest of it you gotta download.
Well, in the case of Spyro, I think people have speculated that they only planned to remake the first one, and then when Crash was a huge success, they ordered Sanzaro Games to go and remake 2 and 3 really quickly.
But even Crash, you still have to download stuff, I believe, though not everything is on the disc or the cartridge.
I'm not quite sure about that.
I'll check.
But with Spyro, infamously, 1 was, at least at first, only 1 was going to be on the disc.
Well, only 1 is on the disc. Okay. That is the way it still is. That I can confirm.
Okay.
Which is kind of depressing in my opinion, because eventually you're not going to get the rest of that game if your hard drive fails or something.
Right.
In any case, regarding that, and another really weird thing, now that I think about it too, in terms of getting exclusive content, Kingdom Hearts 3 development was in absolute hell, changed engines twice? Changed systems multiple times. You can get Kingdom Hearts 3 was ported to the Xbox One, so that released on the Xbox One and the PS4 simultaneously. There is absolutely no Kingdom Hearts collection, though, of all the older titles for the Xbox at all.
Because there's probably some contract saying that they can't do that.
Yes.
Also, the fact is...
Also, it was already developed for Sony's architecture or something.
You'll notice that a lot of Japanese publishers will release on Xbox even if they don't really want to, because there's still a decent enough of an audience, at least in the West.
Well, remember Final Fantasy Versus 13, which eventually became 15 after a series of...
unfortunateness.
Yeah, basically. Was a PS3 exclusive as well. Actually, let's go further back. Final Fantasy 13 was supposed to be a PS3 exclusive, and somehow ended up coming out on the Xbox 360, even though the 360 version basically sold horrible in comparison to the PS3 one, because its target audience was on Sony's console.
Yeah, even though very prominently I remember it being advertised for 360, maybe.
Right, and I think Microsoft pushed to advertise it because they knew for a fact that it wasn't basically going to have the same audience, so they had to really inform them, hey, it's on the 360. I had one friend who didn't have a PS3 and got it on the 360, and it's just kind of funny, actually, because it was developed on the PS3. The 360 version of Final Fantasy 13 cannot do native 1080p. It's just upscaled. Whereas PS3 version does.
Of course.
Yeah. Because it was made for that system. There's also some frame rate issues and some other issues with the 360 version. I mean, the game was pretty oblivion, so it's not worth anything for either system, really.
Yeah.
But it just goes to show, though, that it's very weird that it kind of gets strong onto that, and then like a lot of the extra stuff that still was locked up to the original console company, the manufacturer, like Sony in the case of Square, they get all of the spin-offs, all of that stuff. But then the major title gets ported to something like Microsoft's console. It's so bizarre.
Plus, Microsoft had a weird inclination to get JRPGs exclusively for their platform.
Yeah, for a short period of time.
Blue Dragon,
Lost Odyssey, and what was it? Infinite Undiscovery? Yes.
Also, people forgot about this, but The Last Remnant.
That too. That's not a bad game. Story's a bit generic, though.
The reason why The Last Remnant wasn't exclusive to the 360 isn't necessarily just because they wanted an exclusive game. It's because it was the first Square Enix game to use Unreal Engine.
Yes.
That was also why it was the first JRPG on Steam.
Yep, it was ported. I think you could also buy it in stores, too.
Yes.
Before it was even on Steam. Back when you could still buy PC games in stores. Can you even do that anymore? I don't think you can.
You can buy them at GameStop, but they come with game codes.
No, I won't do that.
But I do remember they still make DVD editions of games for Eastern Europe and companies with not great Wi-Fi, like internet infrastructure. So, for example, Grand Theft Auto 5 came out on 20 separate DVDs.
Seriously.
I remember reading an article about this, so yeah.
That's absolutely insane.
But it's like the floppy.
Man, I can't wait to install World of Warcraft. Only 500 floppy disks to go.
Then you have to download the patch. So you have to get in the truck.
Jesus. It's kind of funny actually, because I remember I have a box of the original World of Warcraft, and it's like several CDs, and then later on they just sent me a thing in the mail, which was a DVD of the whole game with all the patches and everything. That I have over there too, on the shelf.
And to viewers, this is an audio-only broadcast.
Yes. Just imagine me pointing to my massive game collection. You can imagine how amazing it is in your head.
There's over 7 copies of World Championship for Nintendo NES.
There's 4 copies of Sonic 2 there. I have no idea why.
It's 8 Sonics.
It is. And 8 Tails.
Well, Tails is multiple Tails, so that's 24 Tails.
I'm not going to pass a math class. Anyway, another interesting thing, too. We talked about mascots and exclusive content. So, Sony, in the West, at least, doesn't really have a mascot. Except for the closest thing I think I could say is Kratos.
In a lot of ways, yeah.
Because apparently, Kratos showed up as a little boss fight in Shovel Knight on the PS3, PS4, and Vita versions. Kratos was a character you can get in Mortal Kombat 9 on the PlayStation, I think it was PlayStation 4 by that point version, I believe. Mortal Kombat
10.
No, it was Mortal Kombat 9. No, I think it was PS3. It was PS3.
9 was PlayStation 3, 360.
But it was, Kratos was on 9 though, not 10.
Right.
Yeah. And then I also remember in Sony's own titles too, they kind of randomly, especially with Little Big Planet, they had a Kratos level with God of War, they had a Metal Gear Solid 4 level, which is kind of funny. That's kind of Inception in their own universe, their own console universe. They have their own characters kind of crossing over, which is kind of, I think they were trying to do what Nintendo does, where you have Mario Party games, Smash Bros., and heck, even Nintendo first-party titles, there's like Easter eggs of Mario and Zelda games.
Yes.
Like in Ocarina of Time, in the infamous window in Zelda's castle.
Right.
Where you can see Yoshi. But overall, though, it looks like it was really strange to me to think about it, because it feels half-hearted, if you know what I mean.
Why?
Well, especially in the case of like Kratos and stuff. It seems the exclusivity of the characters was something that was trying to be done once games started being developed more as the same game for any system with like just, settings turned down or up just a little bit from its original counterpart to accommodate the hardware limitations. Now it it almost seems gimmicky, especially like the Wii U. Like that seems like really gimmicky, like the Arkham City thing and stuff, as well as the Kingdom Hearts collection, like not being released on Xbox, but Kingdom Hearts 3 still being on Xbox One.
It's also worth noting that there aren't as many physical Xbox One games as there are for PlayStation 4, because Microsoft mandates minimum print runs, unlike PlayStation.
Really?
Yes.
Did you say limited or unlimited?
They mandate a minimum print run for any game.
How so?
For example, have you heard of the smaller publishers on the PlayStation 4, like Sold Out, Tedesco, Maximum Games?
Yeah.
Those companies can thrive because you can go and take some indie game off of Steam and make a PlayStation 4 version and throw it on the store for $20 out of GameStop and it makes a profit. Even if it doesn't sell a lot, like, it's cheap enough that it's worth it. But for the Xbox One, if you want to make a physical edition of some game, you have to print a certain couple 100,000 copies of it.
Is this why from what I noticed, actually, you know what? I never gave this thought. There's pretty much no limited run games on Xbox One, is there? No. Because they would have to abide by that, and they can't manufacture that many because it's not really feasible.
Right.
Shoot yourself in the foot more, Microsoft.
Well, Microsoft arguably is trying to pivot away from physical games entirely, which leads us into, potentially, the future of exclusivity. In the future, what you're going to end up having is streaming exclusive games. Never mind it being only able to work on one type of system.
Oh, you know what we never mentioned at first, though?
What?
The PC exclusives with, like, the...
We didn't talk about PC.
Well, we're not talking about, like, the older PCs, but, like, just regular PC. You have it listed here, like, Steam was a dominant platform, and Epic Games Store is the higher royalty rate. Did you want to mention that, or do you want to just cut it?
Well, if we're only talking about console exclusivity, then...
I meant that more so, like, not like the old PC games.
Okay.
Like, where you had different types of computers. Now it's pretty obvious. You've got Windows and Mac, and really games on Linux, because they'll just use Wine or something if they wanted to.
Yes. So, what Rez is alluding to there is...
That was me talking to you, not the podcast.
There's also the topic of PC exclusive games. Often what happens with these is they go onto consoles eventually, if not right away. There are certain types of genres that might need some tweaking to work on consoles, like real-time strategy games often need some sort of cursor solution in order to work properly on consoles. There are certain genres that are going to have a bigger audience on PC inherently, but that doesn't necessarily mean that there isn't an audience for it on consoles.
Yeah, something really weird, too, is the opposite effect, where it takes forever for a game to actually be ported over from a console to PC. One such example would be something like the Halo franchise. Still takes forever to apparently get the next Halo game on the PC. I think it's finally getting Halo 4.
343 is really cagey about this. They promised to put all of the Halo Master Chief Collection... I almost said Master Chief Condition.
It sounds kind of like a
documentary.
Yeah.
The Master Chief Condition.
It sounds almost like a disease. Anyway.
The Master Chief Collection is coming out on PC, but not all right at once, and just because you bought it on Xbox One doesn't mean that you get to get them for free.
One thing I want to suggest, too, is really shoddy console ports going to PC to, like, the Dark Souls ports and stuff, and then, like, not really, like... the Dark Souls port from... console to PC literally still had, even if you're playing with a mouse and keyboard, still have the Xbox buttons visible.
Yeah, that's irritating. You also have some instances of a lot more Japanese publishers want their games on PC because there's been some pretty heavy lobbying from Steam as well as feedback from consumers who play a lot on PC in the West. PC is not necessarily a big market in Japan at all because they don't like having big towers take up space in their houses stereotypically. But at least with indies, there's been events like Bit Summit that are trying to convince indie developers to develop on PC and release games on PC. And you also have instances of, ever since people begged for Dark Souls on PC, and that came out in 2014 or so, there's been a lot more games that have been ported to PC from Japanese publishers. But some publishers get really lazy about it. So the game might not have graphics options, it might be locked to a certain resolution, it might have limited graphics options. Sometimes you might even get a Vita game that's just been upscaled to like 1080p or 4K. Koei Tecmo is really guilty of doing this. There's a series called... There's the series Atelier game. Atelier Tottori, Maruru, Verona, etc. For those the uninitiated, it's a game all about being a cute alchemist girl. But the PC versions of it are a port of the Vita Plus versions, and you can pretty clearly tell in terms of... It might look nice and sharp, but the environments aren't super detailed. It's not as lush looking as the console versions on PlayStation 3 were. There were even instances where they would put out a Dynasty Warriors game on Steam, but then use the PlayStation 4 screenshots on the store page.
God, that's lazy.
But then when you boot up the game, it's very clearly an up-res PS3 game.
Yeah. And speaking of, in terms of companies taking their sweet time, Final Fantasy 15 took absolutely forever to come out on the PC.
But in that instance, they at least put in some mod tools, and they gave somewhat of a veneer of it being somewhat of a polished port.
I need to make content of that. There's some really funny mods and stuff of that to add a lot of extra value to it, which is the nice thing about PC, I always think, in terms of content exclusivity. This is a little bit, not entirely off topic. When you think about it, gamers can make their own content that's exclusive, and PC kind of does help with that when you think about it. Mods are essentially content and exclusive whatever you make it on. Except for very rare instances of, I believe you could put mods on consoles for Orange Box, right?
Yes, and then there are... I think Bethesda's allowing you to use Skyrim mods on consoles to a certain extent.
Yeah, I think it's just Steam Workshop, though, and it's like way more limited than what the community probably has actually made on the PC and stuff. Like, all their UI modifications, I'm not even sure they allow to have it on there.
But they're acknowledging the mod community in that instance.
Yeah, after they tried to price gouge them and take half the money from it. And say it was a good idea.
Right.
Did you know about that?
Yeah, I did. The whole points system.
Mm-hmm. Bethesda thought it was cool to basically take half the money from their modders.
Yikes.
I mean, it was free for years.
Then you have... We touched upon this in another episode, but... exclusivity to storefronts.
Yes.
So Steam has been the preeminent platform for digital distribution for PC games for a long time, but now Epic Games, riding on the success of Fortnite, is trying to go and bolster their Epic Games Store, which launched in late December of last year, and has been the topic of much debate in modern times.
Yeah, and the Epic Games that I describe with Gears of War basically is no more compared to this Epic Games, as they are a very different company, which looks like very different morals and values, or lack thereof.
So Epic Games Store, because it's so new, they're trying to court developers and publishers to go onto it. So they have a higher cut that goes to the developers and publishers of the money made from each sale of the game. And there are other perks for publishers and developers too, but not necessarily as much value to consumers. Arguably, we touched upon this before, there is more competition, quote-unquote, but what you're getting a lot is a lot of backroom deals, and then suddenly the game that you saw at E3 is an Epic Games exclusive all of a sudden. That happened to the Outer Lands, I believe, the game being made by the Fallout New Vegas developers.
Yeah, and they're buying up properties fast. I wonder,
They bought out Psyonix, the developers of Rocket League. Here's another instance. Rocket League was a game that debuted on Steam, and after being on Steam for years, it's going to be on only the Epic Games Store pretty soon.
Yeah, it's going to be completely pulled from Steam. They're going to honor anybody that bought it there, but after that, it's gone. Which makes me wonder, too, if this is going... These launchers... It's not to say it's not going to play on your PC, but you have to use their launcher as well as pay their price. That's a different scenario. But do you think it would get to the point where they could eventually have games out for different launchers, but they would come with, like, bonuses or something, just like with the consoles?
I believe there's an instance of that already with you.
Really? I thought I was just being, theoretical here.
from what I remember, with Final Fantasy 15 on the PC edition, there are 3 separate editions for it on the EA Store, the Epic Games Store. I don't know if it's not on the Epic Games Store. So it's on the EA Store, it's on the Windows Store, and it's on Steam. The Steam
Square
version...
have their own store, too?
What?
Square have their own store, too?
Yeah.
Explain on that, too.
I don't think they have their own exclusive PC game store. When you buy a game from the Square store, you get like a Steam key.
Oh, okay.
Something like that. So, my point is, with the Windows edition of Final Fantasy 15, if you buy it from Steam, you get a Gordon Freeman costume. If you buy it from Origin, for some reason, then you get a Sims little plump bob above your head. And if you buy it from the Windows Store, I believe, something Halo related? I'm not quite sure. No one will buy it there.
I don't know why you'd buy it from any of these places, but
so yes,
it might be Steam most of the time.
There is launcher exclusive content.
Wow, I thought I was making that up. I was not. What world do we live in? Well, then, as we're talking about launchers and whatnot and platforms, we might as well segue now into the future of what could potentially happen as far as exclusivity goes with video games in general. Anything from the game itself to just the content.
Streaming exclusive games, I believe, is going to be the main vector here.
Yeah, which I have to say, honestly, has me even more scared in the sense of game preservation. And even more so, if video games are going to be offered on streaming services like Stadia, and let's just say for sake of argument, Netflix offers their own streaming service, I wouldn't be surprised. Actually, I really expect like Amazon to do it because that just goes right into Twitch, and that's exactly what they want. Stadia's from Google, so they already have that. Is it going to come to a point where games are now streamed and they have to jump around different license deals like TV shows and anime are at this point?
That would be fantastic.
Oh, God, I want to throw up in my mouth a little just thinking about that.
Plus, there might even end up being, you can only play this little mini-game to promote this new TV show for a week.
I don't want to do that.
I mean, now we have things like Stranger Things 3 had a little game you can play on the iOS and Android and stuff. But what if
was
they
it
made
free?
Yes.
Oh, wasn't that?
But what if you could only play it on streaming for a limited time period and then never again until they allow you to play it again?
That's awful. I hate that.
Well, it's the same thing like you can only watch the Oscars when the Oscars is airing every year, unless you tape it. They want games to be like that.
I don't want games to ever be like that. Well, who is they? I don't even the developers. That would be most publishers. Like, Nintendo won't, because Nintendo doesn't ever adopt anything new until it happened 10 years earlier. So I don't have to worry about that. I mean, their idea of streaming right now is NES games with horrible latency by paying a monthly fee.
Another instance is brick-and-mortar retailers are slowly going away, so retailer-exclusive things like GameStop-exclusive pre-order items and other things like that are going to go away because GameStop isn't really a solvent company.
No.
They've been sinking for a little while. I'm not sure what's going to happen. Best Buy is even flagging as a company. Pretty famously, they're a company where you go in to look at something and then you buy it on Amazon.
I'm actually surprised Best Buy is actually not doing that well. I thought Best Buy was okay. I mean, they're still the go-to electronics store probably in the U.S. right now.
You don't go to Micro Center?
I've never heard of Micro Center or anything. I know PC World's in the UK. Well, we don't have that here, and Circuit City is defunct, so I thought Best Buy was doing okay, but maybe I haven't paid enough attention.
Did you have CompUSA when you were growing up?
I remember it, but I don't think it was like around where I lived.
It was awesome. There was one over in town over. It was pretty cool. I'm not going to dox myself on this.
That's fine. I have to say where we are, but somewhere in the United States is good enough.
So there may be a reduced number of retailers who are going to carry these physical games. And even then, they might be physical, quote-unquote, but you're just getting a case with a code in it, buddy.
Oh, I don't want to think of it.
It's already happening with Final 76.
Some of these topics, whenever we go to the future, I almost just regret it. Like, the technology is amazing, but the the use case is almost always pretty greedy and anti-consumer half the time anymore.
Then what can consumers do to fight against it?
Don't-
Besides voting with your wallet, does that always work?
Yes. I mean, it works a good deal of the time, honestly. I mean, it worked to stop the Xbox One from being online all the time.
True.
As I stated before, that literally put the Xbox One's pre-orders behind the Ouya, which, by the way, is now basically out the door. I mean, it was already out the door, but now it's like totally officially ending support.
I loved it when Razer bought them out and tried to, like, for a year, make it into, like, a bigger brand.
A beer brand?
No, a bigger brand.
Oh, bigger brand. Oh, okay. It's a beer brand.
I remember back in 2012, the Ouya was like, oh my god, I can play these cool little games on my TV. This is going to upset the market.
Yeah, it turns out mobile games on your TV kind of suck.
And it was an underpowered...
Kind of really suck.
And it was an underpowered Android device for the time, even.
And most people basically just bought it because Raspberry Pis haven't caught on yet, and if you weren't already tech-savvy playing emulators, well, you can shove them on this thing, too, for the hell of it, and play Super Nintendo on your TV.
Right. Here's another quiz for you. What exclusive game to the Ouya that later went to other platforms was developed by a team that would go on to make a critically acclaimed platformer?
A critically acclaimed platformer? Like a recent critically acclaimed platformer? I want to say it was developed specifically for the Ouya?
It was an Ouya exclusive.
Did it eventually go to other systems?
Yes.
Okay. Towerful?
Yes.
Ah!
Towerfall Ascension.
Because it went on to Celeste.
Yeah. The developers of Towerfall Ascension went on to make the pretty well-acclaimed platformer Celeste. So some little gems. Towerfall is a fun little multiplayer game, by the way.
Yep, I know. I know the whole story with the developer regarding that. It's a very cool story.
So
at least the Ouya has that. That's some interesting history, much
Yes.
like a lot of failed systems. Obviously, usually failed systems have the most interesting history, but often some of the worst games. That's not a bad game, though.
I mean, there were systems like the 3DO that had games like D's Diner, or D, that was the advent of the FMV game. So there are some ambitious people even on the worst platforms.
So let's think here, though, so we're not all gloom and doom with this, as far as the future goes with exclusivity. I mean, exclusivity in general, do we believe that it's entirely anti-consumer? I mean, we know for a fact we stay like the launcher thing we kind of felt was, and we definitely felt, I know about that we feel exclusive games in general are anti-consumer, but what about more in the sense of just the additional content?
I think the exclusive factor can result in exclusive content that might not happen before, but it shouldn't be at the detriment of consumers having less choice.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that. So, do you think with streaming, maybe we'll at least lose that? Because now what I'm thinking, too, is, well, if it's streamable on multiple platforms, what if this specific platform also has that exclusive content? Like, take, for example, the whole Play as the Joker thing. Let's just pretend a new Batman game comes out that's on 2 different streaming platforms, because that's the only way you can play it now. Let's pretend it's the year 2040 or something. And game consoles basically bit the dust at this point. You stream it on your TV with a controller, on your super fast internet. And one streaming service allows it where you can play as the Joker, and the other one you play as, I don't know, Harley Quinn or something. Doesn't make a lot of sense, but just go with it for the moment. Do you think that's going to happen again? Like, something like that will actually happen? Or is it going to be more like fighting over licenses where it's available to stream on this platform for 6 months and the next, or a year, and the next year it's on this one? But then how the hell do you manage your saves?
There might be some sort of, not this is a bigger term in open source communities, but platform agnostic tools. Even within the movies market, when movies went over to digital, when you buy a Blu-ray nowadays, you get the DVD, the 4K version, the Blu-ray version, the 3D version,
and the digital version that 99.9% of the population never actually downloads.
So you redeem the thing, and often, I think there was some law that said you can't have them locked onto a platform that can then go away. You always have to have a chance to transfer it to something else.
So, why does that law not apply to video games?
Because video games are not as... People could barely preserve video games. Movie preservation is mostly kind of wrapped up.
Yeah. I mean, with flaws, of course, there are definitely things we're never getting back again. You know, a lot of really old movies, problems.
But if you wanted, you could find like a Laserdisc version of Cinderella to watch, in case you don't like how overprocessed and washed out the Blu-ray version is.
Yeah.
Is it easy to play the original version of like a classic game?
No, especially when we talked about before with games that are connected to servers and stuff. Absolutely not. So you'd have to remake the server hardware and everything.
Especially in terms of MMOs. Like, the whole City of Heroes debacle was really interesting to me.
Yeah, I remember hearing about that, basically. So, what happened exactly with that?
So, City of Heroes was an MMO that was mainly like a mid-2000s, early 2000s game, and then it shut down in 07 or so, or 07 or 08. And then what ended up happening is some of the fans went ahead and they got in contact with one of the developers who lent them some server code in exchange for you can't tell anyone about this. So there was a private community for about 6-7 years that was all like City of Heroes, City of Villains content, the whole game, basically being played by these people for free in secret, and then someone kind of leaked it. Or things started leaking out.
Right.
And that broke that agreement, and NCSoft found out about it, the publisher found out about it, and they were going to shut them down. But apparently they're making a deal with them. And for the moment, you can go and download the client, and there's periods in which you can play it.
That's interesting. So they didn't totally close the door on them, like Blizzard did, for example, with WoW, whereas they shut down the private servers and now we're releasing WoW Classic, which, by the way, interesting.
We're going home, boys!
Not just that. You mentioned WoW in our first episode in Games as a Service, which this kind of comes back around to, that World of Warcraft Classic was going to be what Blizzard thinks fans want. So it's going to be...
it's not the original WoW.
It is. It actually is. I'm not even joking you. I don't think you realized it. I didn't even realize it. Now that it's actually out, guess what? It is the original game. Bugs and everything.
Okay. I was concerned that they were going to make it like kind of a facsimile of the original.
No, I hear you. Like the same original maps and everything, but all the changed stats and everything, the progression system be more in line with the original. But no, they're literally using old code. I'm not even kidding you.
Okay, but you still have to pay $15 a month.
Oh yeah, of course.
But do you have to pay a separate $15 a month to play Classic versus the modern one?
I don't think so.
You can play either?
I think you can just play either. I think it's just a different launcher. Plain and simple.
That also reminds me, there was a thing that people on the video games board on 4chan were talking about in terms of World of Warcraft Classic. They criticized streamers jumping in with accounts that they got that are immediately max level, and then all of their people watching the stream just kind of went and swarmed all the areas they were in just to say hi, and that kind of ruined the atmosphere.
Yeah, that could happen. Yeah, that's interesting.
Those people weren't here in 2005.
Yeah, that's interesting, actually, when you think about it. And that's the kind of stuff that happens in things like VR chat and stuff, and Fortnite. Games, essentially, that have multiple people on the screen at the same time.
Like, a lot of the times when these popular esports people are online, they change their names, so you can't just go and join their Twitch thing.
Yeah, I streamed Dead by Daylight for a short while. That happened to me a lot, actually. I kind of intentionally did it, but at the same time, I guess getting sniped by the enemy, the killer in the case of Dead by Daylight, kind of sucked.
But Donkey has to change his name every time he streams Overwatch, otherwise people would be annoying him.
Yeah, that's gotta be annoying. It's come with a different custom name every time.
Yes.
Well, I mean, that's no different than us playing Smash Bros., I guess.
Yeah. So in conclusion, I believe that exclusivity, from a business perspective, is necessary for certain types of games to exist, but if it results in a long-term implication of certain types of games being denied to other people, and no way of getting those games outside of the period in which the business ends, then that's anti-consumer.
Yeah, I agree with that. One thing I'll say that I do like, in the case of the stuff with the mascots, whereas you can, fight Kratos and Shovel Knight and going further back.
That's bonus
Link
stuff.
is so. I like that because
fine.
I understand they can't put that in every game. It's a little thing that only that particular license can allow. That's actually cool, and I don't think it takes away from the overall gameplay experience. Things like the Arkham Asylum example, though, where you can play as the Joker on the PS3 or something like that, or even the case of the Call of Duty games, where they get the DLC map packs first, because it's not my type of game. It's not like I want to see players getting screwed over. I don't agree with that at all, and I think that's very anti-consumer.
And there's something we neglected to mention: Kickstarter games. There are backer-exclusive content.
Oh, shit, you're right. I didn't even think about that.
Modern example, ToeJam and Earl Back in the Groove, really great game, remake of the first one in effect, has a backer-exclusive area that can be in your seed.
I think that should be available as an extra download or something at least.
There was also another...
Even $5.
There was also another instance of the game Amplitude, the remake of the game Amplitude for the PS2, has an exclusive song.
Mighty Number 9, I think, did a lot of this stuff with the exclusive backer, and the game itself is already bad. Yeah, it was. If you played the beta, you got a gold Beck. That's right.
Not me.
Not me either.
No, Beck. Get it?
I will hit you with a blunt object.
Police, if you're listening, that's evidence.
It's not evidence of anything. You didn't hear a clang sound.
You didn't hear a vibration sound.
You didn't hear a gunshot. All right, stop talking.
But in the case of that Amplitude extra song, it was like you had to back $150.
Yeah.
Which is ridiculous.
That's insane, just for an extra song.
Yeah. Given it was a song by the original sound director, who already had songs in the game, but that particular song, which is off one of his new albums, it was exclusive to the backer edition. It has never been sold separately since.
But you have no way of getting it, though, otherwise.
It's in the game, you just can't unlock it in any way.
Oh, we all know how much I love on-disc DLC.
It's a digital-only game.
That's even worse.
So, that's another case entirely. I think if it's a single source that's trying to go and get money to make a game, then I can understand why that's done. I just don't necessarily agree with it. Like, if you were to make a game and say for $200 and we'll put your mom's face in the game.
Okay, yeah, I don't really care about that. It's when it's things that, everybody can enjoy. Nobody else cares if your mom's face is in a video game, I guess.
Then there's cases where, I talked about this off stream, but sometimes games have a put yourself or your character in the game. In some instance, have it be like a boss and stuff, and that's been abused by multiple parties.
I mean, you got Nintendo's Mii's.
Yeah, but that's like the publisher saying anyone can put themselves in the game. In this case, it's like, pay $500, we'll put your OC in the game.
Ugh, yeah. I was thinking more on the lines of the Mii's and Smash Brothers and stuff, but yeah, actually paying that kind of money for that is kind of...
Do you think that stands out to you? Like, can you tell if you're playing some game that? Oh, that's obviously the backer character.
So, all right, let's think about this. So, is it something to digitize your face onto some random NPC?
Yeah, that's.
I don't think that's a big deal. What is there to really complain about missing out regarding that? I think an entire song, which is a core part of Amplitude's gameplay, or a weapon power-up, or a skin or something, is more effective of locking something out from somebody than something that... Who has any attachment to somebody else's face? It's not even a character from a different game. I wish I could have played as that character, but I didn't back the game. No, it's just some random person that had a lot more money than knew what to do with, probably, in all honesty, to spend that kind of money on this.
So I guess that's distinct from, okay, you can't play this because you didn't donate enough money.
Yeah, I think that's worse. I think that's almost just as bad as on-disc DLC or time exclusive.
Sometimes
content.
it can be charming. Amplitude also had there was a thing where you could put a song in the game and it would be available to everyone. And Insomniac did a song that celebrates 20 years of their history.
Okay.
And anyone can play that. It's unlocked from the beginning.
Okay. So how's that exclusive?
It's in the sense of that's a case where content contributed by an external party adds to the game, and anyone can get to it without paying $200.
Okay, sure, absolutely, I'll agree with that. I think, honestly, regarding those Kickstarter goals and stuff, it should just be, it shouldn't ever lock out anybody from accessing something that's still
like forever.
Yeah, forever in any shape or form that isn't part of the actual gameplay. I would even argue, it's not that big a deal, but still, I would even argue that Golden Beck should be like a $5 download.
You're advocating for something in Mighty Number 9, mind you.
I know, it's just, I know it's a bad game, but better a bad game than a good game. Well, I can talk about Marvel vs. Capcom. Infinity, that's much bigger issue regarding that stuff.
Oh, that game, I remember Marvel vs. Capcom 3 had the 2 exclusive characters that were only forever, and then they were sold for $5 a piece.
Yes, that's...
Shin Meguro and Joe Valentine.
That one's gray. I think that's gray. On the one hand, at least you get it. On the other hand, you could have got it for free. I mean, for my example, I totally forgot to register my copy of Smash Bros., so I didn't get Piranha Plant for free, even though I have the season pass for all the Smash character downloads for whatever Nintendo was called. What do they call it?
The Fighter Pass.
The Fighter's Pass. I bought the Fighter's Pass for the game. Yeah, I still didn't get the Piranha Plant, which is kind of stupid. If I really want it, I'll buy it, but I'm really not in a hurry to go get it.
Right.
But that's a gray area, because I still don't personally like that, especially because I believe those 2 characters are still on the disc. You're not downloading anything. It's a code. It's a code to unlock a key that's probably a couple kilobytes.
Yes.
Which is dirty.
But it's not necessarily exclusivity.
No, it's
a related topic.
It's exclusive content, but it's fake exclusive when you really think about it, because it's on the disc. Which, I think at least with the Joker example I used, that wasn't on the disc with Arkham Asylum, which I really don't know if it actually was. That's actually worse if it was on the 360 disc, but I don't know for sure. I don't think it was, but that would be really weak if it was, actually.
Here's another instance. What about when a game gets ported? There was a music game that was made by this Korean company called Super Beat Exotic. It was on the Vita at first, and then a year and a half later, it was ported to the PS4 and Xbox One. It has all the DLC that came out on the Vita, but it has about 6 more packs of DLC that are only available on the console versions. It's like, nice, thanks for playing the beta, guys.
It's not fair at all. That's pretty much how I gotta sum that up right there. It's pretty vile. I think a lot of rhythm games, though, on mobile platforms in general, kind of are. It's really, with the free-to-play model, it's not really exclusive content, unless I guess you consider bouncing that between the arcade versions of these games. You're going to spend more, and you're going to spend on an actual AAA title at the rate of trying to get all these songs on iPad and stuff, on iOS.
Yeah.
Which is why I personally still stay away from mobile platforms.
Yeah, if only there was like an ethics, like some sort of list of things you shouldn't do if you're considering exclusive content.
I mean, I wouldn't make a law still. I'm still very anti letting the government step in on that stuff. I just want to educate people, let them make their own decisions.
Right.
Just, you don't like this, don't support it. Again, Xbox One, online only. Literally did not work.
They've rejected the Kinect 2 pretty uniformly.
Well, the Kinect they tried. It's just, the idea itself wasn't good to begin with. It was literally trying to ride off of the Wii's hype long after that died, and gamers were angry at Nintendo for what they were doing with the Wii at that point. Because that was when Nintendo, after releasing all their flagship titles, Twilight Princess, Mario Galaxy, Prime 3, they produced Wii Music and Wii Sports Resort and a whole ton of shovelware, and all third-party developers said, you know what, screw the Wii.
Counterpoint, they produced Sin and Punishment Star Successor.
Well, they still made good games, but they were exclusive games, though.
Yeah, but Star Successor was a core game being made because this very specific Japanese import game sold well in the eShop.
Yes. No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that more so in the sense that gamers in the mainstream as a whole were angry at Nintendo. Nintendo fans generally kind of kept chugging along with the Wii.
Yeah.
There was still plenty of stuff to play. The system still has a lot of great titles,
Definitely.
but you just people had to remove themselves from the idea when a game comes out, I am no longer going to the option between the Nintendo system or the Sony system or the Microsoft system like it was with the Xbox, PS2, and GameCube days.
Yeah.
When people got that idea out of their head, the Wii continued to do very well, and then the Wii U did horrible, and now the Switch is on fire. In a good way.
Yes. Well, from what I understand, there's a lot of feedback from people who work the retail channels being like, they didn't know the Wii U existed. Or if they did, they didn't know what it was. So a lot of people bought the Switch because they were waiting for the next Nintendo.
Yeah, once again, casuals didn't know what the Wii U was. We did. We own it.
We pay attention to industry news and industry channels, so we're up on the ups.
Right, but regular consumers don't, and especially with the internet age and everything, people aren't watching commercials anymore like the amazing we would like to play commercials.
Yeah, I think
they're not getting across to audiences.
I think the literacy of the average gamer, at least the average hardcore gamer, is increasing due to content like this, the YouTube retrospective channels, a lot. I mean, some of the outrage channels a little bit, but sometimes they can be a little too hyperbolic.
And that's an interpretation. I mean, I learned a lot of stuff, like, early days from, like, Angry Video Game Nerd and stuff, so I think they paved the way for it.
But gamers I would like for them to be more critical and not just buy a game because it's the new thing that I like.
That's kind of partially the reason why we're doing this podcast.
Yes.
Because I don't ever want to take anyone's control away from them. I don't want to take anyone's ability to enjoy what they do. Like, even in the case of, like, Destiny, I said before, if you enjoy Destiny, and I'm sure there is passion somewhere within that dev team, I'm very happy you enjoyed Destiny, but they still said they'd support Destiny 1 for 10 years and they flat out lied. And that's what I'm trying to do, is just educate you on, hey, they told you this and they didn't deliver. So just, think about it.
Right.
Because it could just get worse. If we got away with this, we're going to get away with more.
Right.
And in terms of exclusive content, it feels like something that most of the time does seem to teeter more so on trying to take advantage of consumers. In the later years, whereas the earlier years, it was more just based on limitations.
Yes. So it's more business-based than really limitations-based.
Yeah, these days, especially, because I think even Xbox uses Blu-ray now, right? So there's really no excuse in terms of storage and stuff.
Right.
Alright, I think that about does it for that episode, then. Anything else you want to conclude?
I basically said my concluding thoughts. I think that people need to be more critical of the exclusive idea, while also recognizing that it's up to the businesses to decide what they want to do, and the market should decide what they ultimately want.
Yes. And little cutesy things that can only work because of said license, like mascot characters and bonus levels that could only work on that system just because I don't think is that harmful and is okay to kind of create healthy competition. Buying the game for your favorite system so you can have that little Easter egg is a lot better than just locking someone out from totally different content, but is really still within the same universe as the game, like the Joker play as example, basically.
Or like, you can only play Rise of the Tomb Raider on the Xbox One for 9 months, and then it comes out on the PlayStation 4. That happened.
Okay. That's interesting. But now I'm curious, so let us know what you think. Do you believe that console exclusivity is a thing that's going to continue? Game exclusivity in general, in terms of the actual hardcore game industry? And is this going to continue even further into streaming services like Stadia and beyond? Let us know. I'm generally interested in what you have to say. Until next time, I've been Gamer Rez.
I'm Deft Beck.
And we'll see you later.
See you later.